this guy, Tom Jones, comes up to him as he's exiting the property and pushes him against the fence.
Stop.
Yes, pushes him against the fence.
At the police academy.
At the police academy, handcuffs him, and tells him, you ain't supposed to have that kind of money on you.
But that's bizarre. They're in the police. I mean, the police academy is not like a public building.
It's not a public building. He's got money. That's it. And so
this is crazy.
So he gets thrown up against the fence.
And if he's going to do that at the academy,
what is he doing on the
imagine what he's
street?
doing on the street.
Man,
exactly,
man.
my man. Exactly. All right, everybody, welcome to another great episode of Cases Gone Wild with me, your host, Jon Marko, brought to you by Marko Law. And boy, do we have a great show for you today with a great attorney and great friend, and actually a candidate for Detroit mayor. Todd Perkins is going to be with us on the show today, and you better stay tuned to listen to some of the wild and crazy things. This guy, I've known him for a long time. He has some wild stories for you. If you like the show, share it with your friends. Please give us a thumbs up, 5-star review. You can watch us. We're filming live on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Marko Law. Go to our website, markolaw.com. Watch it on our Cases Gone Wild, or listen on your Audible or all your other apps. Todd, thanks for coming on the show, brother. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, man.
Good to see you.
Thanks. I've been waiting to get on for a long time. I watch it a lot, and you guys have a good time.
Yeah,
on the show.
well, man, we're going to have a great time with you.
Yeah.
Perkins for the people.
Yes.
You're running for mayor.
Absolutely.
Mayor of Detroit.
Yes.
One of the largest cities, needs a good mayor.
Yes.
Why are you running for mayor?
Well, I'll say this. The city of Detroit has been great to me. I love the city. I was born and raised there. And I have, come back to the city to be a part of the city and be a part of the rebirth of the city. And I've seen the city at some of its worst times, and I've seen it at its best times, but the love never was gone away from the city. And that's where my practice is. I've been down there 27 years.
Yeah.
And at this point in time in my life, I'm at a point where I can give back. And what I need people to understand is, in being an elected official or in being a leader, in being a mayor, it's not a position of power to the extent as a position of service. And in thinking of the spirit of service, I grew up and I was a kid who went to U of D High School. Yeah. And the Jesuit tradition is men for others. Yeah. And this is more of a continuation of that educational process that started even before I went to U of D. It's what our parents taught us. And, we didn't grow up with a lot of money. In fact, my dad's a barber. My mom was at one point in time, she retired as a clerk at the public library. And so I had 5 brothers. They sent us all to Catholic school. I don't know how they did it. Yeah. I'm eternally grateful today. But they started that in our home, that even though we didn't have anything, we would share with others and make sure that we always did some level of community service or some type of service, whether through the church or through our community. And it's that sense of giving, it's a richness that that money can't buy. And that's what I'm seeking in this total effort to give all of myself to the city, because the city needs all of us and all of yourself when you give that. So I'm in a position to do that at this point, and leave the practice of law at least for 2 or 3 terms. Yeah, and ultimately come back. But nonetheless, the skill sets that I've learned, the experiences that I've learned, I've had over the years, I believe being able to bestow that on our citizens in the city of Detroit is something that no one else can offer.
Yeah, and you have a very successful law practice right downtown, not too far from my office. Right. You're right in the heart of the city of Detroit. And so you have to give that up, right? If you become mayor, you essentially have to.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a full-time job being mayor of Detroit, right?
Right. And it's, here's the thing. Anyone who believes that they can do something else besides being mayor at the time that you've been given this awesome opportunity to serve the city is looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. You have to. We have already created a succession plan at our firm. I have a great law partner, Adam Clemens, young guy, 40 years old, kind of like yourself. I mean, energetic, dynamic lawyer. What we have established in our culture will continue. And I'm also, sort of campaigning for my younger brother, who's a judge, to come back after November 4th, which is the general election. The August 5th is the primary, which will pare it down to 2 candidates. And November 4th, winning the election. November 5th, we are working full scale into that secession.
That's
plan.
awesome, Todd. And let's tell our viewers a little bit about your background, because I remember, even as a young lawyer, watching you. I remember watching you. You had court. You did stuff at the Court of Appeals and the appellate courts.
Yes.
You used to represent the city of Highland Park.
Yes.
I know. I remember.
Yeah.
You've been involved in a lot of big cases. You've done a lot of big things. You're kind of a big name around town. Like, when there's stuff going on, you kind of expect Todd Perkins to be there. So tell us, our listeners, about your background.
Well, thank you. So I was a kid, grew up, born on the North End, or I wasn't born on the North End, but I was raised on the North End of Detroit, which is an area north of the Boulevard, east of Woodward, all the way up to that goes to Hamtramck or Highland Park is the cutoff, and that little slice of Detroit, and that's where I reside today. I grew up there, went to U of D from there, U of D High School, went 7th through 12, and then I went away to school out east, come back, and when I came back, I wanted to do, a lot of people go to school away, and particularly like my older brother, we went to the same college. He went out east. He stayed out east.
Yeah,
and
I went out east and I came back too,
yeah,
like you.
Yeah, because it's something that the heart of the people and the heart of America, I believe, is in a city like Detroit.
Yeah,
we are not going to give up. We're not going to accept no for an answer, and that's part of our culture. So I wanted to be a part of that, and I came back, and my dad had a friend who was very good friends with Coleman Young, and I went to see the mayor, and he had me in his office. He says, "You want to do something in the city?" He says, "You go work over here at the 14th District Democratic Party." At the time, we had, I think, either 14 or 15 districts, but we've lost population since then.
Yeah.
And so I was working there as an intern, and I also worked at MBD Bank as an intern. So the Democratic Party was an unpaid internship, but I worked, and eventually they would
Probably
give me a stipend.
Work,
oh yeah, and it was just, you got to meet these people. At the time, Greg Mathis had just become a lawyer, and he was running the neighborhood services for the city of Detroit.
Greg Mathis from the show?
Yes.
Like Judge Mathis on the show? On
absolutely.
The national TV show.
Yeah, and then the next year I was working there. It was when Mayor Archer and the election, the 93 election, after Coleman Young had retired, I then I was then entered into law school, graduated in 96, and shortly after graduating and getting my license, I got back with Coleman Young as a retired mayor, who then had a campaign to get one of the casinos. He had a vision of melding the older, established, wealthier figures and stakeholders in the city of Detroit with younger up and coming. So he had about 5 of us young people and 5 well-established people, and we joined in and made a group to make a bid for a casino, and we called it Paradise Valley. And that was, it didn't go, but the experience and the relationships that were created from that really set a pathway of having access to people. As you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Now, you do have to do your homework, and you do have to, be in the trenches, and you're out in your office late at night, whether you make your office at home after you come home so you can be around your family, or, before I didn't get married till 2005, I used to sleep in my office sometimes. I had a suit there and go over to the Detroit Athletic Club and take a shower and go right to court, because I was totally enveloping myself in the law, the understanding of the law, the experiences, where I would sometimes, when I was young and I didn't have cases, I would go watch lawyers like yourself. At the time, people like Mike Morgenroth was a mentor of mine. Elliot Hall was a mentor of mine. And I'd go watch them in court when I didn't have work to do, and I would just learn things that you can't really learn from the books.
No.
You understand?
And that's harder to learn nowadays.
Yeah.
There's less people trying cases.
Yeah.
You can't, that's not all live. I used to go sit in Wayne County every Friday. I'd a stack of 12 motions. You run from room to room.
Right.
You know, you can't, no better experience.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, but the disappointing thing is, and I hope that changes, I don't see the people sometimes with the younger lawyers, they don't have the energy.
No.
And maybe it's the technology because a lot of things are on Zoom. But the thing is, they don't realize if things are on Zoom, you have an access point where you don't even have to leave your house to watch motions.
Right.
You know, just to sign in and watch motions. Most of my Fridays are consumed with motion call, or, you know, right now I'm currently in a trial, so I couldn't, you know, go in a motion call yesterday. Fortunately, my motions were granted for yesterday, you know, without a hearing. They're, you know, perfunctory motions, discovery motions, and things like that. So, you know, and so then I created Perkins Law Group. Actually, it was not necessarily named Perkins Law Group until 2011, but I had the law office of Todd Perkins. I had never had a job working for anyone. After graduating, when I went into law school, I worked at the Court of Appeals during the law school. And after graduating, I started my firm and hung out my shingle and have been doing that ever since.
And you've done a great job.
Thank you.
What are you doing now? Like you said, you're in a murder trial right now.
Yeah.
So you do criminal defense.
Criminal defense, civil. Well, I do civil work cases like you. A lot of 1983 cases, which I'm sure if anyone watches your podcast, because you do a lot of them, they know what a 1983 case is
even if they don't know what it's called, right?
Yeah, even if they don't know what it's called, but where, you know, a lot of times people are treated badly by police, so much so that it's actionable in court. And most of the times, 95% of the time, I am the plaintiff counsel, meaning that I'm the person suing on behalf of the individual. But now, and also back in 2011, I was a city attorney in Highland Park for 4 years. Currently, I'm the city attorney in Inkster now, and I defend those cases. So I defend, and I do civil defense, and I do civil plaintiff work.
Yeah.
And so I find myself doing that. And being, you know, speaking to representing, because I represent, as city attorney, I represent the city council and the mayor, and their interests on how to run that city and advising them in that regard, and allowing and telling them and guiding them on, you know, what's the appropriate agendas and different things like that. It's interesting because in the city of Inkster, the mayor is a lawyer. And I went to law school with him. He's 1 year older than me, so he was ahead of me. But I went to law school with him. And it's really, it's great working with someone who has an understanding of, you know, and he was a practicing guy. He wasn't just a guy who worked in a job, but he was actually practicing lawyer.
How's Inkster doing? Because I had, for our listeners who aren't in the Detroit metro area, it's a suburb of Detroit, right? It's kind of a distressed suburb.
At one time it was, and they are now working themselves out of this, and they're being more, you know, austere and spending money and being more mindful of how money is spent and understanding and trying to increase their tax base. So that's what cities are doing, and that's what the health of a city is the city to ability to grow commerce, the ability to grow businesses, the ability to increase residency.
Yeah.
And so that's really, and in the meantime, not incur unnecessary costs, not have you know, work contracts, or if you've got a garbage contract that you try to work off a couple $100,000 here or there, you know, and that's what that's what the leaders of cities do. And also listen to the complaints of residents, to listen to them, to act on them, to be that servant. And I see a lot of people, and I've learned from them and learned from those experiences, which I believe will help me in a way that I don't think any other, you know, going back to the campaigning, that other people don't have that experience
in the government. Yeah, I had some cases against Inkster for 1983 police misconduct cases, and I remember they didn't have money. They didn't have insurance, because insurance is so costly.
It's so costly,
and especially if you're a municipality, a big city, and they didn't have money in their coffers. This was maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember when we got a result against the city, they had to put it on the tax rolls.
Yes.
So in other words, all the residents of Inkster had a Jon Marko lawsuit. It wasn't called that, obviously, but it was like the Jon Marko lawsuit tax on their tax bills to pay for it. And you don't see that generally in That's not a thing that cities want to have to do.
Well, that's not a thing cities want to have to do, obviously. And in both cities, Highland Park was a city that was financially distressed. Inkster was at one time, and they are, again, working their way out of it. But if we understand this in a total perspective, a lot of cities in Southeast Michigan, Detroit was the first bankruptcy of a major city in the United States. And so Detroit is still under the auspices of a bankruptcy. And, they have they're winding it down, and they themselves have to be more austere and more mindful of how revenue is spent and how revenue is collected. So, that's not something that a city ever wants to really do, but those are the things in the day-to-day things that leaders of the city have to discern and incorporate into their daily work.
Do you see it kind of like, I think it can be like a vicious cycle of, because I remember with Inkster, using Inkster as an example, I also represented police officers from Inkster.
Right.
And I remember, who had issues with their job or whatever, unemployment cases. So I had it on both sides, so I could see both sides. And I remember talking to some of these police officers, and they're like, remember, this was a while ago, but they were like so poorly paid. They had horrible training, and they had horrible retention. Right. And so it created this vicious cycle where it's like, if you can't retain good quality people, whether you're a police officer or you're anything, then that makes it more likely that you're going to get sued because they're going to do stupid or bad stuff. And then you can't afford, then you got to pay that Jon Marko lawsuit tax.
Right.
Then you can't pay. And then it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So,
so you're absolutely right. And I think that city like Inkster, they have a police force there's an increase. They had a better contract this time around.
Yeah.
We actually do, as city attorneys, we also do the labor negotiations too. So we have Chief Jenkins, who was interim chief when I became the city attorney. Now she's the formal chief of the city of Inkster. And you have are quality officers. You have officers who love to do the job that they're doing. And so what you were experiencing back in those several years ago or 10 years ago is you had basically part-time officers.
I did. He was part-time.
Being paid maybe $15 an hour, no benefits and different things like that. So
it's like you go to McDonald's or something.
Exactly. And you're buying into officers who may have past practices that, well, otherwise, if you were a city that could pick and choose who you wanted, they may not be the ones you have. So what you're saying is, if you have those officers, you have a propensity or a likelihood that you might have some other problems in their policing efforts.
Yeah.
And so that is that vicious cycle. And I think, cities like Inkster and even Highland Park have learned that, and now they're looking to make sure that the officers, number one, are paid well, treated well, and that they love the job that they're doing. And, and being involved in that, in this city, it's a big city, but it's small enough that those officers have actual contact with the mayor, have actual contact with city council. It's not so big that they can't just set a meeting and go meet Mayor Nolan, or I call him Attorney Nolan, but Mayor Nolan and, or the city council people, they have actual access. So it is the feeling that I have about it. It has a small town feel for a city that's pretty big.
Yeah, right. Well, tell me some of your crazy cases, because you're on Cases Gone Wild.
Yeah.
So tell me, you have some crazy police cases, 1983 cases?
Well, I have, they're always something, I look at police cases. When I sue in a 1983 case, a lot of times if I had a theme, it would be something to the effect of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what I see is officers who sometimes they're good people, and some officers, as having done a fair amount of criminal defense work, I know a lot of these officers, and sometimes I'm shaking my head and how could you have done this? You're better than this.
Yeah.
And then you see other officers who just have that's just what they do.
That's just what they do.
They're just what they do, and the history of them doing it becomes hard sometimes for these police forces to get rid of these officers. And then they also have to represent them. So, I have had some, and I can't recall, I want to give you, rounded edges on some of these cases because, some of the ones where you get a nice sum for your client, they also have non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. But, for me, it's kind of like for municipalities, there's really no confidentiality agreement because everything is subject to FOIA. Freedom of Information Act request for a regular citizen who wants to find out what that amount is. But I've had the situations in which you have a guy who's working part-time as a bouncer in a bar, and he is he works a day job, and I know the guy because he and his kids and my kids were going to the same school. I mean, just a hardworking dude. And what's interesting about this guy is that if he's not 6'6" and 350 pounds, he weighs nothing, and he's not. I mean, he's a big dude. And so his presence can be intimidating. But when you talk to him, he is a guy that is, he's clearly a big teddy bear kind of guy. He's the guy who does security for a lot of high-level officials and elected officials. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when I go to these political events, I'll see him there in a dark suit. And, he really knows how to do security because the value of being a good security person is not to be recognized. Is to be able to blend into this blue wall that you have here. Yeah. And not really, and just watch the room. So sometimes and it'll take me a couple of minutes and, I'll like, oh, you're here. And he says, and he's still doing this after what happened. So let me tell you what happened. He is working at a bar downtown. After he gets off work, he goes to work part-time. Because
like moonlights,
and but he works a factory job, like a good paying factory job, but he likes to do security. He's done it for many, many years, and mostly because of his size. Yeah. And so he goes and works, and
sometimes the size itself can be a good deterrent.
It is
big dude,
Right. But if you talk to any of those guys who do security, the value of being a great security guard is being able to use your words and not your physicality. Mm-hmm. And so he says, so he's at work, and it's really before the day gets started. The police come in, and it's supposed to be a compliance check, or they're looking at the license, and things go awry. And it went quickly. And, it's all, and here's the thing, it's all captured on video. So let me tell you the ironic thing about this story is a year or two before, the people who own this bar, they, what green light is. And for your audience, green light is a system in the city of Detroit in which the city of Detroit works collaboratively with businesses and police department to operate a video system that will capture videos for the purposes of security and for if there's a crime that's committed that police can more easily access that information.
Like video surveillance.
Right.
Outside businesses.
Right. And inside.
Oh, and inside. I didn't know that. Yeah. And then doesn't the restaurant or bar or gas station, or do they pay a fee? Like a membership fee, almost like a cable bill or something?
Absolutely. They pay for the fee. And
then the city installs the camera, right? And then is there somebody watching that at the city?
Well, they will watch it.
Pull it up?
Yeah, they can pull it up. Actually, they do have access to pull it up. And so...
And they call it green light because it's a big green light on top of the camera flashing, right?
Well, it's a green light for the purposes of letting someone know who might be inclined to do something wrong. You're in a green light area. Don't do this.
Yeah. So they know, don't rob the store. Right. There's cameras connected to the police department.
Correct. Right now, in live, that they can access right now.
Yeah.
So the irony of it is,
it's
clearly a deterrent. Yeah. So the bar owners didn't want green light, and they were going to.
Why not? Privacy invasion?
Yeah, sometimes privacy. Some people say I'm running my own system and I don't feel like paying the city of Detroit fee. But
is it expensive?
It's not that expensive I imagine for a successful bar, it's not that expensive.
But it's
for
an
smaller
extra
business, it's an extra bill. But I think their interest was, listen, I don't want my clients to be, which is their clients considering the people who participate in, who come into the bar, their patrons at the bar.
On a police video
On
system.
A police video.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And, so eventually they were talking about, they wanted to hire me to do that. And I said, you could be successful in defending having this, but I said, there's some value in it. And ultimately they agreed and had the green light in system in place. And
So
ultimately,
the system's supposed to catch criminals, and it's I have a feeling you're going to say it's recording the police doing something bad.
did they? Oh, okay. So yes. So let's get back to the story,
Yeah.
and that's the irony. And so had they not had that, I mean, the bar might have had their own system, but it's interesting that they had this entire system that captured this guy. I mean, he was pummeled. I mean, just
By the
pummeled
police?
By the police.
Why did the police come? I mean, they're just supposed to be doing a licensing check or something?
Licensing check. So what happened is they come in and he's got it's early in the night. So he's dressed in kind of like me, but doesn't say Perkins for mayor on his shirt, but he's got his jogging suit on and he comes in from outside. And eventually I guess it's not audio on it, but my understanding and by all accounts, he was asked, does he have a weapon or a firearm? He says no. And he keeps on walking.
The police asked him?
Correct.
Okay.
And number one, he's at his place of business and they're doing a compliance check. What reason would you be asking him, number one? But,
right.
And there's no indication that you need to know that for officer safety. These people are at work,
Right.
And
they're security guards.
Yes.
That's kind of weird.
And he didn't have a weapon.
Was there some previous beef or something?
No.
It's weird.
I mean, I'll tell you what I believe was happening, and that's just been my belief. It's never been something that was established, because here's what happens. It wasn't established as a fact because it never went to a jury. It wound up, Judge K. Beam, she's awesome.
Oh yeah, I love Judge.
She's great, and she knows the facts and cases. She works cases really hard as far as looking at your motions. You know how sometimes you have the feeling when you go into motion hearings that judge didn't really know. They were kind of like their JA or their judicial assistant really gave them the direction. That's not with her. She knows it, and her team knows it.
Yeah.
But so we're the guy comes in. And here's what the real tragedy or the real thing. I mean, it was bad what happened to him, but after the fact, it's even worse. So at the time, he comes in and a woman officer asks, does he have a weapon? And he says no. And she grabs him. And then he moves his arm and just walks away, pulls his arm away from her.
She just grabs him for no reason?
For no reason. Grabs him and he pulls his arm away from him. Immediately after she grabs him and pulls his arm away from him, another officer comes in and just starts attacking this guy and pummeling him. And another officer.
That's horrible.
Yeah. He's on the ground. And he did, something, you think about it. A guy who physically could have probably tossed every one of those officers around, right? His reaction was spot on what we would train people how to react. He just curled up into a ball and just absorbed the punches. And eventually they stopped. But in the meantime, he looked up and he saw another officer had a taser pointed right at his head.
What?
Yeah. And so all of this is going on. I mean, it didn't take but seconds. And eventually, after it's over with, the diffusing moments, and after it's over with, guess what happens?
What?
He gets arrested.
For what?
Assault on an officer.
Resisting. Yeah. R&O, right?
R&O and assault.
Yeah, they always do that.
Assault. And
you could be like a deaf, blind paraplegic, and they would say, stop resisting.
Right. Well, they try to use that on their body-worn cameras to say that. You know why they do that? Because they know that they're doing something wrong, and the only protection that they might have is the allegation that you resisting and obstructing, and in the performance of their duties.
to do that. Like as they beat someone, it's like stop resisting.
And as I'm coming up with another one, but let me finish this one.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I'm in a murder trial in Ann Arbor.
And was this guy already your client, or how did you?
I knew him.
Oh, from your kid's school.
I knew him, but that wasn't who called me. Another client of mine who worked at the bar, who worked with him, called me. I'm coming back from a trial in Ann Arbor. It's a Friday. I think this happened on Thursday. So he's been there overnight, right? So he's been there overnight. The guy calls me a Friday afternoon, and I got the call, and on the way back, coming on 94 or maybe 96, coming back, I call Rodney, and Rodney says, hey, man, a friend of mine who works at the bar, I didn't know that I knew him at that time. He's got arrested. And so when he got arrested, I said, well, for what? He says, the police came in the bar and they beat him up. And so he's just giving me a general description because I don't think he's had an opportunity. He did have an opportunity to look at the tape. because he worked at the bar, because the bar also has an opportunity to look at the tape.
Yeah.
And so he says it's atrocious what they did. They locked him up, and what I did was I went to see a judge Friday evening and had a judge sign what's called a writ of habeas corpus, and I got and had a hearing and got him out immediately. And so what I did, because at that time I had a relationship with the chief of police, James White, who's now the director of DWIN, which is the mental health organization for Wayne County. I called him sort of as a, in this business, it's about relationships. So if there's going to be an embarrassing moment, because it was embarrassing in this particular moment, I want him to be aware of it. And, there was no element of surprise to, I got you in this situation.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what people don't understand in the cases that you and I do. When things happen in trial, it's very rarely an I got you. People know what the damning evidence is going to be before it even comes out in court, even if the jury doesn't, and they still feel I got you. Those are the cases that sometimes should be settled, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side, because of ego, hubris, and all these other things, and just the fact that they want to go after me as a plaintiff's lawyer or after you as a plaintiff's lawyer, they don't want to settle, and they find out why they should have settled later on. But, so ultimately, he was never charged. After I sent in all the information, I told the chief, look at this. And when they did the story, even the chief, they had it investigated, and ultimately was determined that this guy should never have been charged, never should have been arrested. And, he went to see a doctor about, the beating, got, some bruising on him. But also, when those cases, what's most important is the mental effect that it has on our clients. So, and he went to see a doctor a couple of times, and, he said, he wanted to move past it. And, that was one of the things that he is, helped get that settled, was he did everything you would want a client to do, anything he asked you to do. But another 1983, I got to tell you.
So did you bring a case against the...
Absolutely.
And you were successful, it
yeah,
sounds
well... It settled, and it was a nice settlement for him. And
yeah, it sounds like it should be.
Yeah.
And one quick thing, Todd, because what our viewers should understand is what happens a lot in these police cases is the police and the prosecutor will charge the victim of police brutality with resisting the police or some other BS crime. And one of the reasons that they do that is because if your guy... Like, let's say your guy's lucky. He had Todd Perkins as his lawyer. But let's say you're somebody who has a public defender who's overworked and underpaid or doesn't have an attorney at all. If that individual is convicted of resisting the police, even though they were beaten wrongfully
kills their
or
case.
whatever, it is a case killer. And it completely prevents you from bringing a false arrest claim.
Right.
And so a lot of these, and these people are smart. A lot of the prosecutors of the cities or whatever will say, look, charge them with even like a misdemeanor, like or even like a low level resisting police. There's like
disorderly
an obstruction,
conduct.
disorderly conduct.
Right.
Yeah, they love it. Disorderlies, obstruction
Yeah.
police, which is just about anything. You walk into a police officer, you walk in the same direction. It's obstructing police. So then they use that to kill their civil case.
And you know what they'll do?
Which is horrible because they beat up a human being.
Absolutely.
And then,
Absolutely.
And then they charge him with a false crime.
Listen to what happens in the court. And you see this because you're right. A public defender has sometimes in the morning has 50 cases.
Yeah.
And every case, they do the best. And some of them are really good lawyers.
Yeah, right.
But what happens is I see these cases happen all the time. They'll charge them with disorderly. And what they'll do is they'll say, we'll dismiss upon a stipulation of probable cause. So if you have a stipulation of probable cause, even if the case is dismissed, what you've acknowledged in your stipulation is that there was probable cause for you to get arrested or there was probable cause to be charged.
You can't sue.
You can't sue.
And it's horrible. I have people come to me and I'm like, this is a huge case, but I can't bring it because you pled guilty. They're like, well, Mr. Marko, they were charging me with 3 felonies.
Yeah.
And they said, take this little weensy thing. You won't have to go to jail. And you'll pay a fine.
Well, there are certain circumstances, and I think you've done some cases like this and had some success, is that if the injury that they face was so far outside of the boundaries, but it still reduces where like where you have $1 million case, now you're taking 200,000 or 50,000.
I tried a case like that in federal court, and the guy was beat up by the police. However, he was charged with a felony, same thing, obstruction. Right. It was bullshit. He pled to a misdemeanor, so they were able to tell the jury, ladies and gentlemen, he's a criminal. He's been convicted of this crime related to this incident.
Right.
I could still say the police went too far on the force, but that was pretty hard. The jury said, well, he was convicted. He did violate the law. Right. So they, it's BS. But you said you had another case that came to mind
so there's
too?
another 1983 case. And in this case, the guy was, you'll love this one. You've seen it in the news, and it's old case because we had COVID, and then there was a criminal charge against the officer. So I represent an individual who's been a law enforcement officer, a police officer, Detroit police officer for about, at the time, maybe 15, 16 years. He's had some injuries on the department, so he can't work on the force because on the job, he's been injured and has had several ankle surgeries. And so, but, to meet this guy, I've had the absolute pleasure of representing some of these cops are just some of the nicest guys in the world.
100%.
And I tell the guy, I don't know if you know this movie, he's so cool. I mean, he's a super cool dude. This is like guys like 6'6", 6'7", but he's a real thin guy. But he reminds me of a guy, Pootie Tang is a movie. That's how he is.
Pootie Tang!
He is, and he is just that cool of a dude. He is just, now his girlfriend, who's also a cop or police officer, is not so cool. I mean, she is protective of her boyfriend. And, so here's what happens. Every police officer in the city of Detroit has to do 40 hours of training every year.
Okay.
And they go to the academy for this training. So oftentimes you have people who don't really interact with each other. And see, my guy works in IT now. So he's not on the street. So he's not in court. So people don't necessarily know him.
He's in an office job. Yeah.
But if everyone recognizes that who's at the police academy is a cop, then, there should be some camaraderie or something.
Right.
So in this situation, during the course of that 40 week, he was able to align his 40 hours a week with his girlfriends. They live together. And so during lunch.
So they go to training together, right? So they can hang out and see each other.
And exactly, because she works on the streets. And so during lunch, she had to go to the bank. And she had to pull out, she had some business that she had to do. And she's kind of like an old school lady in the sense that she likes to pay her bills with money orders and, buy the money orders. So she goes out and takes out maybe $20,000 out of the bank. And she doesn't, because they're at training, she doesn't have her purse or anything with it. So she gives him the money to hold while they're there. So sometime after they get back from lunch, he's got these real, he's a fashionable dude. He's got those skinny jeans on, right?
Yeah.
He's a tall dude, skinny jeans on. So he goes into the restroom and he's going into the restroom and the money is coming out of his pocket, but he's stuffing it in his pocket. And he goes in his restroom.
So he's just got bills, $100
he's got bills coming out of his pocket.
He's just a walking bill machine.
Exactly.
ATM.
Hold up. He doesn't smell like marijuana, so there's no indicia of that. Not that that's a crime, but he doesn't smell like that. He's at the police academy, although he's not wearing a uniform, but a lot of people are not in uniform. But so another officer, and I think it's interesting that this individual, Tom Jones, is a white guy. My guy's a black guy.
Yeah.
So he looks at my guy and he sees him in the bathroom. And so they leave. He goes back to class for a minute. And so when the class is out for the day, he's leaving out with his girlfriend. And this guy, Tom Jones, comes up to him as he's exiting the property and pushes him against the fence.
Stop.
Yes. Pushes him against the fence.
At the police academy.
At the police academy. Handcuffs him and tells him, you ain't supposed to have that kind of money on you.
What is that? What do you mean you ain't supposed to have?
Hold on.
If
you do a lot of this work, you know what that means.
I know what that means. I know what that means. But if I was walking with money coming out of my pocket, they'd just say that's $1 Million Marko. Nobody would say anything about it.
Well, I think even if you weren't Marko, that guy Tom Jones wouldn't treat my client the same way.
But that's bizarre. They're in the police. I mean, the police academy is not like a public building.
It's not a public building. Now, some people would say, well, they're contractors at the building and things like that.
Who
He didn't
gives
have
a
any.
shit?
Yeah, exactly. He's got money. That's it. And so
This is crazy.
So he gets thrown up against the fence.
And if he's going to do that at the academy,
what is he doing on
imagine
the
what he's
street?
doing on the street.
Man,
Exactly,
man.
my man. Exactly.
I mean, you were born. You just
I'm
weren't born yesterday.
That's right.
So here's what happens in that department. In the department, what I appreciate is what the department did, and the department ultimately charged Tom Jones with assault and battery
Good
on
for
my
them.
client.
Good for
on
them.
my client, and he was convicted.
No way.
And he was convicted. And you know what I did, and what was interesting, and that case still, we're trying to work that case through. Ultimately,
Is there a 1983 case?
Absolutely, it's one pending.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, because the criminal trial was going on and took so long, and we had to wait for it to go through its process of getting through the system, and he had his appellate rights, which were ultimately denied. His appeal was denied. And when we got back to court, we're back in court now, and ultimately they've asked, what's your number? And so we're in that process right now, or we'll go to trial. I feel very comfortable, because he's a witness that will. Oh, he is a great witness.
And what's his defense?
No. Tom Jones' defense?
Yeah, a black guy shouldn't have had that much money, or what?
Well, I don't know what his defense would be, because now he has to testify, because he's testified at his own trial, so he doesn't have to worry about the issue of the Fifth Amendment. But here's the interesting thing, and you know about these cases. What could the city do at this point? Because the city could say, we're not providing him coverage.
Yeah, you're out on your own. You hang him out to dry, basically.
But we're also, in the area of whether it's a Monell claim. We haven't done all those motions yet.
Yeah.
So we're stopped.
So there's a lot going on. That's an interesting story. It kind of has a happier ending than normal because
absolutely.
Because I think, and I'd like to see what you think, Ty. You've been doing this longer than me. 20 years ago, he wouldn't have been charged.
Right.
And I think.
Right. And 20 years ago, we wouldn't have the technology that we had, like we have body-worn cameras. Although we didn't have body-worn cameras in this situation, that police officers are recorded with their efforts, but it was so many witnesses to this effect. And I really think in my, my sort of the devious component that will probably never come out of it, I think that there are other officers who prompted him to do that. So to do that to my black client. And, ultimately, and here's the best part about it. Well, the best part about it, we'll be getting closure for my client. But the best part about it was when this individual was fired, they ultimately fired him at a chief's hearing after he was convicted, had a chief's hearing. I got a call from the Detroit Police Department.
And what did they say?
That they had released him or had terminated that officer. And it was just really something I could call my client because, some of these people just don't deserve that. Like sometimes you'll see people and you'll see them on video, like this thing is going downhill, and, one could be wrong. And, they violate the rule that my grandfather told me. He says, never argue with a fool. And I said, well, why not? He says, because if somebody's watching you and they're not able to hear what's going on and they're watching you from the distance, they don't know which one is the fool.
That's a very good piece of wise advice.
So, and it's just, so in these situations that we talked about, just these two, absolutely did not provoke anything, did not do anything but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about his girlfriend.
Okay.
Now, she wasn't so cool. When that guy threw him up against the fence, she started screaming bloody murder. My client was just like, hey man, that cool component, what did I do? And he's not even hollering, she's hollering, which prompted other people to come out. And ultimately he unhandcuffed him. And then he wanted to shake his hand. I'm like, dude, I mean, really? Are you going to do that?
Shake his hand?
Yeah. She was like, don't you dare shake his hand, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, so yeah.
But that's good that the Detroit police did that deterrent effect because it can go one of two ways. The way that they handled it says to other police officers, you can't do this. You can't violate the law. We're not going to accept this. And it gives value to your guy.
Right.
If they would have taken the other tact, which I think 20 years ago, and I say this because I used to have all kinds of cases against the Detroit Police Department and the gang squad and all this stuff. I'm not saying it's perfect now, but I can tell you, at least from my practice perspective, I am not seeing the types of cases in general that I was seeing 15 years ago.
Right. Well, I think also the technology.
Yeah.
Officers are being recorded, and they know they have their own personal green lights on their chest.
Yeah, which
so
protects everybody.
It protects, and you know what? If you talk to cops, and I talk to them all the time, I represent police officers too. The good cops, they want that.
They like it.
They like it because when they have a dispute, because oftentimes the disputes are something small, but it could metastasize into something larger.
Big, yeah.
And it's often traffic. And it's often a traffic situation. The person's mad about the traffic. And because, here's the thing. Even the highest echelon, financially, and I don't think that just because you have money that you're at the highest echelon.
Right.
But, just a rich person. Everybody will interact with the police some point in time in their life. And, oftentimes they'll stop someone who's a well-heeled individual who feels like, the law doesn't apply to them.
Right.
And they'll complain against them. But it's that body cam that protects them too.
That's right.
So it's the bad cops that don't really want them.
That's right. Right. Yeah. And hopefully, I think they talked about some places have mandatory body cams for everybody. Yeah. I think it would be good for
Detroit
us to get there. Oh, they do.
Detroit has it. And now if you're, I believe if you're you're higher up, like if you're a lieutenant, I don't think, at certain points and times, but everybody who's on the road, and if you're doing surveillance, because if you're doing surveillance, you're supposed to be sort of surreptitious or not really readily noticeable, and a body cam would make you very noticeable. Yeah. So,
but I think there should be a state law that says, in general, body cams, because I think it's good for everybody.
Absolutely.
All right. So tell me, we got a little bit time left here. So tell me about some of your political. I've seen you represented Highland Park.
Yeah.
I don't remember what case it was, but I've seen you argue some important political things. Tell me about some of your political cases that you've done.
I've got a great client who happens to be the prosecutor from Macomb County.
Can only be Pete Lucido.
That's it, man. The only problem I have with Pete Lucido is he went to De La Salle and he didn't go to U of D. That's the only problem. And
he's a hardworking guy. Love him or hate him, he's a hardworking dude.
I love him, and the best time for him and I to talk is 5:30, 6 in the morning, because he knows I'm up and I know he's up.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, when I call him, if I miss that 6 o'clock call, then by the time 7 o'clock is, he's in his office. Right. So no matter what people may think about him, the citizens are getting every dime of time out of this individual. And, he's
for a good price, because they don't make that much money.
No, they don't make
public, sir. You're not going to make that much money either when you're if mayor.
But it's not and I believe that that's where you need to be in life, is where you're not looking to grow,
monetize the position.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't say it better. And that's what this is about. It's you look at it. Your pay is more like a stipend to just sort of ebb the cost of serving in this position, and that's how you have to look at it. And when I see people who have been in government and at the trough, as my parents used to say, the government trough for years, it does make you question things. And I believe that a person like Pete Lucido, he was at one point in time a state senator, but for a long period of time he was in private practice, and he was very successful.
Yeah.
He is very connected as a businessman, and he decided at some point that his kids were older, his family had grown, and he wanted to start in public service, and that's where he started out as state senator. Then he comes over and becomes Macomb County prosecutor.
And I think it's good when the people, for public officials, the people need the person more than the person needs that job.
Correct.
If you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe that's what I was conveying about the issue of monetizing the position.
Yeah.
And it's his policies that he has are, and I have to say this because we talk about it and we joke about it all the time. I'm a Democrat. He's a Republican.
Yeah.
But I'm working on bringing him over to the party. And so he's a guy who has supported Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of what he supports, I look at the man.
Yeah.
And I look at the individual, and I enjoy conversation. I enjoy him as a person. I enjoy him as his energy that he wants to bring to that position. And I enjoy fighting for him.
Because he doesn't have to do it.
He doesn't have to do it. And he's caught up in, it's interesting where these petty squabbles come into place.
And Macomb County politics, well, any politics is dirty.
Yeah.
But doesn't it seem like Macomb, it's like real, like just a lot of hate going on.
Oh my goodness, man. And it's just, it took me a while to figure it out. And, I've been representing him a couple years now. And I told him, I said, look, why don't we just go talk to them and, like we do in cases, right? He says, Todd, it's not, you're so naive. It's not even like that out here. He says, go back to Wayne County if that's what you want to do. He says, you guys can work things out in Wayne County. He says, it just doesn't happen. It says, oftentimes it takes the court system to ring in.
It takes a knockout punch.
Or the vote of the people. And Peter Lucido is a person that doesn't mind going to the vote of the people because he feels that, hey, I've given you all that I have, and I've given you the love that I have, that I want you to understand that it's not a quid pro quo with us.
What are you doing with Pete now?
So at one point in time, I was representing him on some budget issues and allowing him to increase his staff where the commission had given him extensions or added portions to his budget so that he can increase his staff, a couple of prosecutors or more so administrative staff. And that was rebuffed by the county exec, Mark Hackle. Yeah. And, rebuffed because he didn't want it. And I don't know why that would be the case, because why would someone want less public safety and what less, prosecutorial staff?
Well, it might not be about the end result, but more about the personal feuding.
Absolutely. And I'm saying I've come to that conclusion today.
Yeah.
On my own.
But it didn't make sense to you.
It just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so we were very successful in the two campaigns that we had, or I call them campaigns, but they were cases. But because it's in the political milieu, it's in that environment, it's a campaign of sorts. And, we went to the Court of Appeals, we won, and then they went to the Supreme Court and they were denied certiorari. The Supreme Court didn't take it up because when you have these issues with respect to the budget in this situation, your direct court is not the circuit court. Your direct court is the Court of Appeals.
So you go straight up.
You go straight up. Go straight up. And so then about a year and a half later, the same thing happened or a similar thing happened, and we did the same thing and we had the same result. And ultimately, here's what's funny. So at that time, I'm representing him as the prosecutor. Along the way, there's, last year was a campaign, and, he had competition from the Democratic Party. There was a candidate. Now that candidate's, I don't know if Mark Brewer was was Christina Hines' campaign manager or not, but he files ethics complaints against Pete Lucido for having a picture that his daughter took of him at his desk in his office on his campaign literature. So, so I start representing him, and that's more so representation of the person, right?
So like in the ethics complaint and stuff?
Yeah. The ethics within, every county or most every county has an ethics ordinance, and there's an ethics board. And there's an ethics board in Macomb County. And so what happens is this, they had this going on almost like as a nuance, as something to take a stab at him outside and using it for him to say that he's unethical or, but it still obviously didn't work. Pete was very successful in his campaign, but here's what they did. So what happened, because I'm representing him personally, they said the Mark Hackle's administration went to the commission and said, well, he can't represent him as the prosecutor and have the county pay us. So
you had a conflict?
I had a conflict.
Wow.
So now
this is why, good luck, man.
Yeah.
Politics is a dirty business. This is why I said on previous shows, and I'll never run. I'm not running.
I said that too. So don't use those words, because God will make you eat your words sometimes. I used to say that, and now I'm totally enveloped in this process.
I mean, I just don't know. People have come to me and they said, why don't you run for office? They said, why don't you run for governor? Why don't you run for judge or something like that? And I don't know. I just don't want to open up my family, my personal life to all these attacks, because like you just kind of said in that, they'll use anything. I mean, they're going to attack your family. They're going to attack your personal life. They're going to attack your ethics. They're going to attack your work. They're going to go dig up,
Give it a couple years. You see, your kids are young.
Yeah.
Once your kids get older, you won't worry as much because you're not worried about what they say about you.
No.
It's about your family.
No.
And as a family man, I know you love your family, man.
Yeah.
I love watching you and your family on trips through Facebook.
Yeah.
You guys got to follow him on Facebook. You have some awesome times, man. It's just, and the kids are having great times too.
The kids have a great time, man.
Yeah.
I said a lot of nevers. I was like, I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. And now,
so are you going to learn?
Life,
now you said you'd never run for office. So remember this. He said he'd never run. Give it 10 years. When those kids, because that's the most important thing I know to you.
Yeah.
You know, you do all this to.
I love the law and I
yeah.
love my family,
Yeah.
man. That's the two. What else? For me, that's all there is right
Yeah.
now. You know,
and they'll come, you know, and those things mature. And, you know, and there's no expiration date on family. You know, the only expiration date we have on family is when they put us in the ground.
That's right.
But,
that's
you know, but on the practice of law, for me, the expiration date is November 5th.
That's right. All right. So we're going to end the show with this. So you're running for mayor.
Yes.
3 things. Give us the 3 biggest things that you would do or change or that you think need to be done in Detroit if you are elected mayor.
Okay. First and foremost is continuation of working on public safety. You know, if you're going to grow a city and create a resurgence, a rebirth, particularly in your neighborhoods, people have to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I believe that's done with more interaction with neighborhood organizations, neighborhood community organizations, for them to be stakeholders at the table and the design of how public safety and how they are to be policed.
Community policing.
Community policing. And keep that word in mind. And I'll round out because I know we've been at this for a minute. With this conversation, we need 2 hours, man. But
I know.
But we'll come back. I'll come back when we can. And then the next one is the development of economic centers in the neighborhoods. You know, I was a kid who lived on the North End. I could walk to 3 blocks to go to a grocery store, and on the way back from the grocery store, I could buy live poultry or have live poultry and live fish. I mean, maybe not buying that today, but it was an economic center. And across the street, they had dry goods, they had clothing, and today it's nothing in my neighborhood.
How would you help get that back?
I'm glad you said that. I told you that word, community. There's a thing called a community quarterback. Currently, the Detroit has, I believe, it's 7 neighborhood strategic funds, and corporations have pledged a nice amount of money, $5 million, millions of dollars for each area of these for these neighborhoods. But what I want is more. I want more from corporations, and people say, well, how are you going to get them to do more? Well, one, I'm going to talk to them about, and I'm going to talk to their language. This is how the practice of law helps me. I'm going to talk to them about what's something called ROI. You know what ROI is, but the general public needs to understand corporations work off return on investment. If I'm giving them a blank tapestry to work with these community organizations too, because I want everyone to be at the table. But most importantly, that works in a community quarterback is for that corporation or that well-heeled individual to have that unbreakable will and the refusal to not give up. There's an example of that happened down in Atlanta. A guy, Tom. I want to say Cousins, who used to own the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah.
And he did that with East Lake Meadows. He took an area that was decimated by crime and drugs, and he made the decision, I'm committed to this, and now today it's back to where it was in the 50s.
Yeah.
And, it's not necessarily back to where it was in the 50s, where in the 50s it was 95% white and 5% black, and then throughout the 70s it reversed itself. Right. But now it's still a heavily black community, but yet it doesn't mean that they should be deprived of those services and deprived of the having access to commerce and access to golf courses, and it's not just a black community, it's a community. Yeah. And it's frequented and lived in by people of all races and colors and ethnicities. So, that is the example. And he's taken that example, and he and Warren Buffett are working throughout the country on that. But I want to do something like that here because, the best form of flattery is copycatting. Yeah. And what you'll see in this campaign run, the things that I'm telling you right now and what I've done on podcasts, I hear other candidates now using. So, hey, that's fine.
Take it as a compliment.
I do take it as a compliment. I take it, if we all want the best for the city of Detroit and thinking of the mindset of rising tide, all ships rise.
Yeah.
Then you can't go wrong.
Absolutely. All right, third. What about 3? You told me 2. Unless I missed it.
No. But there's more. There's a lot of things within there that could be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
But
the
my
third
podcast
one is
producer will kill me.
I know, and so I'm going to do this one. I want to reduce taxes.
Yeah.
I want to reduce taxes, but I did when we talked about the city of Detroit. It's still under the auspices of a bankruptcy. So those are things that you have to make sure that you're doing. But I believe there's a tax capture ability because there's people who are not paying their fair share.
Yeah.
And if we do the enforcement there, we could actually focus on reducing taxes. And the idea of reducing taxes creates a sea change mentality. And now corporations and people will recognize, hey, it's not just a heavily taxed environment where the mills are so high and the taxes are so high that it's just feeling like you're just gutting me, where I could just live outside the city and come and enjoy what's in the city and go back home. No, we want you to come in here, and this is the direction we're moving. The ultimate goal, if after 12 years, what if, the super success story would be if the city had even half the tax component.
I would love that. I mean, we both have our offices downtown.
Yeah.
We have to pay for it.
Yes.
And I'm okay. I love the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
But that would be nice. And I have heard, some people, some successful businesses saying, why do I want to pay an extra
and they move
tax?
out.
And they move out.
And
then guess how much the city gets when they move out?
Nothing.
Big fat zero.
Nothing.
So all right, my man. Well, look, hey, when is, tell everybody, when can they vote?
Well, they can vote August 5th. All residents of the city of Detroit, August 5th, vote for Todd Perkins. And
how do they get to your website?
PerkinsForThePeople.com. And
Perkins for the People. PERKINS for the people.
Yeah, for the people. FORTHE people. Because sometimes people will say the number 4, but yeah. PerkinsForThePeople.com. And you can sign on, and you can look at my story for Detroit, how I traveled and made this voyage.
Yeah, you have an
journey.
Interesting story, man.
Well, thank you.
And thanks for being on the show.
Man,
and good luck
thanks,
to you,
man.
my man.
Oh, man. I've been trying to get on here, man. This is the hottest thing around, man. I love it. No, it is.
All right, you got my vote, Todd.
Well, thanks, man.
All right, everybody. Special thanks to Todd Perkins, running for mayor of Detroit, for coming on the show. Great guy, great attorney. Thanks for listening. Remember, if you or someone you know needs legal help, or you want to learn more about some of the issues that we've talked about today, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Go to our website, markolaw.com, markolaw.com, or give us a call, 833-MARKO-LAW, MARKOLAW. We'll see you in another 2 weeks on another great episode of Cases Gone Wild.